You're live. Okay, this is kind of an impromptu video that veers into two categories because some of these paintings are older, and so I can show you technique stuff where I've improved or figured out the medium better. And I don't consider myself the best painter in the world anyway, but I've sold some and I've given away plenty, and um, brought in a fair amount of stuff, so hopefully we won't be here forever like people at the art walks who realize I have 300 pictures or something there instead of the usual 20 or whatever. But watching a lot of videos or a few about Halloween decoration, this will not be that. That will be a separate follow-up video that I will likely do soon, and will contain more kind of Irish, Scottish artwork maybe that I didn't bother with this particular time. So seasonally decorating. So if you're a painter, see, I work in acrylic paint, so I can't really paint much in the summer. It dries too fast and the house is too hot. It's even too hot right now. I had to take off a flannel shirt and put on a lighter weight one. Still in autumny colors, but specifically for this video, I didn't want to be too sweat to death running around the whole room showing pictures to the camera. But we all agree that like spring and summer have their colors, and then autumn and winter have their colors. So if you really wanted to go all out, you could change your paintings if you're hanging paintings instead of computer monitors or something on your actual wall. Again, I wasn't thinking this would be a very dorm-friendly video per se, but if you are an art student, then maybe your mood, like my mood, in the autumn, you want to paint more autumny kind of stuff, even though you have a bunch of unfinished spring things that you haven't worked on all year or all season or whatever. So like, something like, your kind of Europe thing. And I've posted some photos of my paintings in the community menu before and gotten no response at all. But obviously this is not a very autumny color kind of scheme, and should be fine. And a lot of I'll come back to it, but like Japanese stuff tends to be more cherry blossoms and that kind of thing, so we'll talk about that. Certain things, like I've had like I find images online. This was a misprint, and I'll show the bigger thing later. This was a misprint that my toner went wrong, and I got an interesting green that wasn't part of the original photo. So I was trying to copy it, more or less correct, accurate. And I had posted this a couple months ago, back in June, I think it was. Nobody replied, like I said, but I'm debating if I want to try and lighten it up a little bit in some spots and make it a little more summer friendly-ish. I'm not sure exactly how to do that and get all the contrast that I want. But I wouldn't consider this a perfect spring picture because it's a little dark, especially down here at the bottom where it's kind of gone. I was trying to make it, cementy or concretey, but it's kind of oceany and kind of slate gray. So I'm not sure it's, exactly achieving what I want for the season that I want, right? Whereas something like this, for direct contrast, and skipping ahead a little bit, I'll come back, the color of the sky is meant to be this dark. It's meant to be kind of a twilighty, cloudy kind of thing. And again, I'm not entirely sure that it totally works. I might change it and do something else with it. But we can see there's a definite difference between, that and this. Where, yes, there's orange, but it's not an autumny orange. It's a spring, summer, poppies orange. And purple. I know a lot of people like purple this time of year. To me, purple is a Scottish heather spring kind of color more. And I tend to treat it more lavender than a deeper purple. Anyway. And so closer to pink than cartoon vampires from Sesame Street or whatever. Hang on 1 second, I just gotta put this. Okay, I will save that one. Bring this one. Then I'm not going to show this yet. This is kind of an odd. Oops. We're having issues with the strategy. This is not really autumny at all, but I might tweak it because it's another one where my toner failed. And so I never was able to fill in all the details exactly, but I kind of liked it in an abstract way, and I don't know how I'm going to finish it, but one of these days. This is the kind of thing where we're right at the end of summer, which is not really a separate season, right? And this is another unfinished thing where I kind of did it off the top of my head and then saw a picture that matched it and tried to make the painting match the picture kind of after the fact and that kind of thing. So not a perfect thing, but one of the things I wanted to mention, and we haven't gotten to some of the earlier ones yet. You can see it in this. This is a prime example of when I used to do the paint. I was doing it much more opaque and not really very thick and didn't quite understand. I wasn't trying to use the acrylic as watercolor most of the time, but some of the times I did, and that was a disaster because acrylic, I used to think acrylic and watercolor were the same thing, but they dry differently and they behave differently. You can thin acrylic with water, yes, to stretch it, and glaze and layer a little bit, but the overall effect will mostly, that's good for filling in gaps more than covering large areas. It's better to use the polymer medium or the transparent mixing white or something like that to cover the large area than to try and do it with water. So you can see in these old ones, there's a lot of white gapping in there. Again, well, I would now go through and layer on top of that to fill that gaps maybe with a little bit of the same color, but not do the base layer like that anymore. So that's another thing I need to go back and fix with a picture like this, whereas you can see like this corner is much more recent, a lot more thick application of the paint, more correct, so I never really had any instructors at my college who explained things like that very particularly well. That's why this sky is so heavy and thick and dark. A lot of glare, sorry. Can't really help that. This is a much more recent painting where I painted over something else that I didn't like. And so went back. But this was one where I did like every single brush stroke, on the grass kind of thing, which is hit or miss how well that can work. But of course, inspired by Van Gogh. And of course, this is one of my copies of a Van Gogh that did not come out very perfectly, but an attempt. And I might paint over this eventually one of these days with something else because nobody's bought it. Even though I've put a bunch of replicas all together at the same time so people could kind of pick, along the theme or whatever and have it. But again, he's a one very good example of seasonal stuff where, a lot of that comes through very, well, like this would technically be another one of those late summer, beginning of autumn kind of pictures. So if you see it in the spring, it's kind of, I don't know. But here's a different one. Again, This one is definitely not really meant to be autumn. It's meant to be summer, but since we have such an amount of orange mixed in, you could still use it for this time of year more than you'd want to, I think, use this for spring. So that's another one I did from inspiration there. And that being kind of an older one. You're gonna have to forgive me for all the getting up and sitting down and getting up and sitting down. Kind of not really any way around it. So here's another two. Let's do both of these. Here's one. Yeah, that one. Going out of order slightly. But here's one that's not really meant to be autumn, but it was roses. This one I did a long time ago, but this was an actual still life that I modified. I was actually painting from a real bricks and pot and thing and couldn't quite pull it off. So then I kind of made it more cartoony and just kind of went with it. But it's got a little bit of the moody purple. It's got some red. It's night and it's supposed to be rainy, but I think it still says summer slightly more than autumn, maybe, or spring-ish, even though it's kind of gloomy. Your results may vary. You know, obviously nobody's bought it. Don't know if they ever would. Whereas something like this is more recent. It's kind of a combination of the Van Gogh with an actual photo that I found on the internet somewhere, or a calendar. See, a lot of people used to come to me at the art walks and always ask me, "What's your inspiration?" It's like, it's not exactly rocket science. I saw a picture that I liked and I copied it. I mean, like, I made it a little more impressionist and a little less realistic because I don't paint realism as well as I'd like. So everybody calls me an impressionist. Sure, okay, why not default? But obviously, autumn, like, you know, no mistaking that this is an autumn picture and not a spring picture. This one, yeah. Okay, so I was going to show this one before I showed that one, so I did them out of order. Whatever. Whereas this, another late summer into autumn with the poplars, with the horsies, with the dark. This was another one that I did from some photo from a calendar or something. And so I just blew it up. So a lot of these I couldn't really copy the detail very well because the detail was, you know, a third the scale or whatever, but I didn't use a grid or anything. I just paint them more or less freehand. And some come out better than others. But that's definitely one that I thought would have sold by now, but hasn't. I guess it's not as good as I want it to be. Let's see. Here's one. This is meant to be summer. Again, I almost put this one up. I've shown it on the channel before, where the portrait is. I was gonna put, but it's the wrong dimension. It's the wrong size. So again, the canvas isn't the right size. But I was gonna mix it up for summer or autumn and put it. But this is with the sunflowers. It's technically late summer instead of spring, but I think that the green's a little light and a little more spring. I don't know if I can consider it finished, but I think it's fairly decent for one of my newer ones. And it definitely did. I didn't go overboard trying to put in all the details. I left it, you know, a bit more loose. So that's why my brain is fighting with myself. Is it finished or not? Because part of me likes it as it is, but part of me is like, oh, come on, put it into my eyebrows. You know? The self-critic, right? This is definitely, I've tried to enter this one in some art shows and haven't gotten anywhere. This was one where I really, really want to talk about technique a bit more here because this was a big shift for me. This was the first painting. It wasn't the first one I really did, but it was the first one where it was reacting correctly, where I was really using wet on wet and the paint was responding and everything was going very well. And then I added the figure, which you'll see in a second. And the figure is more cartoony than I wanted, but I was trying to make it look wet on wet also. So it was kind of odd because I'm just not that good to pull it off exactly the way I wanted it to. So I'll have to try and, fix it maybe or not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but it hasn't been accepted in any shows, so it hasn't sold. So here it is. But this is an idea of how you can make a beach scene also an autumn scene, even though it's technically another late summer. And I do have some other beach ones that I'm going to show next that would have been maybe a little more logical transition to this. But as you can see, she doesn't come out quite as well as I wanted her to. She looks more like the girl from the Grateful Dead Shakedown Street cover than the actual. And so here's some other beach ones. And I have a smaller one that I wanted to show first, but I don't know where it is. It's in that stack, maybe. So let's do that one last. Okay, so here's like the kind of thing that's autumn, but some people would say it's more colorful, so it could be spring. But it's definitely, it could take place any time of the year, but most people would not necessarily consider this a summer kind of effect. And I forget which of these I did from one of those how to paint books. This might have been one of those. I don't remember exactly. But a lot of them were. This was from a photo. This was an actual Central Coast. So again, we've got much more of a, instead of sand, we've got the blonde grass. And I had to cellophane these to try and put them in the gallery. So that's why it's kind of annoying. To show, so I didn't want to unwrap them all. But it's still summer, not moody winter sky and all that. This one a little bit more moody winter sky, but also with the autumny kind of. But you also get the fog in summer at the beach, so that's kind of the thing. You get that June gloom, but then your landscape, you'd want to lighten that up and make that, spring rain color, green popping through, even if not the whole thing green, that sort of thing. But this was also from somebody's photo. Sorry, copyright infringement. I don't know all your names. I just have the end result. And when it comes to decorating, the end result is what we're after, of course. We're not going to hang a painting that's unfinished most of the time. So here's some smaller ones. Okay, yeah, so coming back to the Japan thing, here's one. Well, let's do this one first. This was supposed to go with the first one I showed. See, obviously, Greece or Middle East or stuff like that. Definitely has more of a summer vibe. Yeah, that you've got, washed out color here, but it's not meant to be autumn leaves or dead grass. It's just open ground space. And I think that reads better in this one than it did with, like I said, that other one where the blue was kind of grayish. And blue that was meant to be some kind of paved ground or concrete or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so skipping ahead briefly. So Japan stuff, there is a way to do Japan stuff where it can be more autumny. Obviously, I have a lot more green here. I don't have very much changed foliage yet, but it's peeking through. It's starting to come. I did this from a very small picture, and all the details aren't exact and perfect. And it's another one that needs some touch up. But so that leads us to, so again, what I was saying, like this has purple just because I needed a background. See, I had accidentally painted it here. and wasted paint before I realized my blunder and turned it over. And so by this time I was upset, frustrated, and bored, and didn't put in the amount of effort that I had originally planned. And so it got kind of shortchanged. But you could, hang a thing like this in autumn if you really felt like it. Nobody's going to stop you, but not typically the autumn colors. Usually, again, the pink and the cherry, and I have a whole bunch of Japan stuff elsewhere that would be better in a different video. But here's one that I did based on a scene from a movie, and I changed it to, instead of water just flowing over rocks, to more of a waterfall. And this is one of my older ones that's kind of the transition to when I started really figuring out the paint. So I like this one. And, but it's definitely autumn, the maple leaves in the red Japanese maple, and the yada yada yada, and a bit more, still green, but a bit more brown. I don't know that I did the water exactly perfectly. I didn't make it all gray. I kind of put more white into it than most people would probably say is advisable, but I really wanted to draw the eye, to something like a focal point without really understanding all the composition stuff. I kind of, like I said, I was kind of trying to make a vision from an existing image that I still framed on the TV or whatever, and then was like, oh, when I first saw it, I thought it was one thing, and now that I'm playing it back, I'm realizing that it's not as dramatic. And so I really wanted to, pump up that drama and make it an exciting nature scene for that. Then, of course, there's always, when you have two of similar things, you could use them as bookends, or you could swap them out in the same space. So here's one of those Irish gardens. It's not really finished. I'm not really that happy with it, but spring, summer, and then bang, in the autumn, you have the whole courtyard changed. But of course, with stuff like this, you're getting borderline more abstract than realistic again. But I liked, again, the looseness of it. I might try to do them again better some other time. I say that a lot. Get used to it. Here's another Ireland or someplace one that's just more kind of gloomy and moody. It's kind of not really any particular season. It just sort of is. And I did this from a very small photo that might have been black and white even. So I don't know that I would consider this autumn. But I figured I'd show it in this video anyway, just to kind of, again, compare and contrast things that you can do. Okay, here's a couple of older ones that I really have to come back. So there's that one that I wanted to show. We're almost to the good ones. The meat of them. Yeah, okay. See, then this, which is, again, more of a late summer than an actual spring. If you wanted to go back and redo this one kind of thing without the gray clouds and with more pink and lavender or something, and really make it a spring scene, you could. But technically this is an autumn beach scene. So there's that. And then this is, of course, another one of those early autumn kind of New Hampshire covered bridge things. This was from a calendar. I really want to go back and maybe improve some of the detail in this one. I keep meaning to do that, but I don't know where that photo is right now. Okay. Skipping back again to the beach thing. So here we have, I should have showed this one sooner. Here we have another kind of gloomy gray sky, but with definite burnt orange and ochre and sepia or Indian red or whatever, that kind of thing. So it's a beach, but it's a gloomy, moody autumn beach. I copied that one out of one of those books, I think, but not like to the letter. Something like this, kind of in between again with the pink, but we got the darker green, we got the darker pink. So I don't know if you'd want to consider this spring or fall, but it's not a copy of a Van Gogh, but it's I tried to kind of do it a little bit of his style, but a little bit more Cezanne, I think. Just kind of just playing off the idea. And here's another one of those Ireland ones that doesn't look like a typical Ireland one, because it's definitely an autumn Ireland one. So I'll have to remember to show this one again. And of course, I didn't finish the horse yet. Where something like this, a little bit trickier. I never quite finished this one because again, it's not meant to be autumn. The adobe is just kind of that color because it's just kind of that color and all that. But you could definitely use something like this for autumn. This one's horrible. I never put in. I don't know. The detail never quite worked out, and I'll probably paint over something like this. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of barns and kind of thing. This was from an actual photo, and it was just so busy. I was trying to figure out how to dumb it down without putting in all the fencing, but I still wanted the fencing, and then the foliage kept covering over where the fencing was, so I'd go back over the foliage with the fencing, and then I redid the red of the barns, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, we're getting to the typical kind of theme stuff a little bit more here. So I got a bunch more that's like that I'll show you in a minute, but we'll come back to it. Yeah, that one looks special. Whereas stuff like this that's a little more off the beaten path, again, technically a summer kind of idea. This was from somebody's picture that I saw somewhere. But I love the moodiness of it, so I copied it. And then I made from my imagination partner to go with it, with the dark bases. I might have had a reference for some of this. I don't remember, but it seems like it was one that was. I know I did the colors to match the first one that I had already done. I know this one came second. And then this was also from a real photo, but along the same lines of all the colors. This one's a bit dark. I really was trying to introduce some highlights and things to break it up without it looking so mushy and muddy. Not sure I completely achieved that. But I was also trying to be faithful to the thing, so I was trying not to put too many colors in the wrong spot and all that kind of thing. But definitely autumn. There's no getting around that. So older ones. Oh. Okay, there we go. Okay, taking a back seat. Then these two are older. This will be a good example of what I was talking about with where you did apply the paint. And so you can really see the shift, even though the second painting is in some ways worse than the first painting. The overall paint technique and everything is improved. So this was a gal that I knew that I wanted to kind of do from memory, similar to that one, although I had reference photos for that one. But that one was originally a gal from the TV, and I didn't like the way it came out, so I painted over it. And tried to improve it. This one I haven't painted over it at all, so you can see the really thin paint in these background areas more, and this kind of washy way I used to do everything. Like the hair now would have a lot more. Well, I haven't filled in all the gaps and that kind of thing, like I said, because I never really finished this one anyway, but it's got a lot of white spots and kind of things showing through. And I didn't really know how to do trees, but I wanted to do them in a non 100%, literal way anyway. But the grass, on the other hand, I just I don't know. I didn't even know where to begin or what to do with it, except that I knew that I wanted to use colors from the main part in the other parts to give it some sense of unity or whatever. So, but the colors, again, this could be autumn-ish because it's got the dark sky and whatnot. But it's not meant to be a horror scene or anything. It's just, like I said, it's just kind of a nice try. But like I said, I didn't want to have a super bright sky to be brighter than the figure and draw the attention there. So it was kind of like, well, how do I do that? I'll make the sky dark. Okay, but now it's this moody night Dracula vibe or something. This one, on the other hand, I was starting to figure it out. I kind of got lazy in some spots where the wicker is and such, and the figure, I had a photo that I was working from, so I should have been able to get the figure more correct. But when I was painting, immediately the pencil lines would smudge and that kind of thing. So this is one of the ones where I'm sure I did the drawing on the canvas first instead of just winging it like this. Obviously, I just painted. I was like, okay, I'm going to paint this right now, and that's what it was. And when I first started out, I used to draw everything and the pencil would smudge, so I stopped doing that, which is why I started doing everything that way for a long time. Then when I started getting more serious about it, I tried to do penciling again. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I penciled this. So you can see where the application of the paint is much better. The figure is almost correct, but the dimensions are here and there. It would need to be redone. But I haven't gotten rid of it because I think it's a decent representation of a practice painting from when I was doing stuff more to try and sell the stuff, even though I wasn't selling a lot of stuff and that kind of thing. And so here we do have even, again, we have the bright white and the blue, but we also have it's more of a summer picture than a spring picture-ish because of the dark red and the whatever. But this could be autumn too, even though the bright blue is a little bit not quite autumn. If you were going to make this autumn, you could even put green foliage outside the window and it would still read more autumn than a really summery blue. But of course, I was copying the picture because I thought the picture worked and da-da-da. So I didn't want to experiment with it too much. It was like, well, the sky's blue, so blue it is. Again, it wasn't really trying for rocket science there. Whereas these, I'll do these two. These I literally copied. These are way more recent. These are from the last couple of years. And so this was from a photo, and it's as late summer as you can get without having, again, any autumn colored foliage up in there. And it's not meant to be a companion with this one, but they do complement each other well. And so this kind of house on the hill, it's a little bit creepier, moodier. Again, if we wanted to go holiday instead of just seasonal with this one, we could, because we could pair it with something that is kind of reminiscent of horror story or something, but it's not meant to be a horror story picture. It just kind of looked that way. But again, not a little bit of brown in the mid ground and the hill and whatnot, but not overtly autumn colors. It's technically another summer picture, but right on that cusp. So something to consider. Right, those would last. This. How many we have left? 3. Yeah, we'll do you first. Even though that one came after that. Right. Okay, so this one, save for last class, almost done. This is a total summer one. Again, another technically spring one, but the colors could still be autumn-ish. This was another photo that I saw that I got lucky with the girl because I didn't have to do as much detail because it was mostly her hair, and I just kind of went for a vibe instead of a literal translation. But this one I really did go out of my way to make the colors pretty accurate to where they were in the photo, because I figured, well, if I like the way it looks, then their composition is good enough. I'm not going to play with it too much and try and improve on it by moving the red over here and the orange over there and that kind of thing. I just painted it pretty close to what it was. So that was, like I said, definitely a very summer thing. Then we get into, okay, that one's older. Some of my older ones now are actually better than some of the newer ones. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's life. I don't know why. I mean, some of it was kind of spur of the moment-y, and some of it was kind of like slavish devotion to try and accomplish something and then failing at accomplishing that. So this, for example, was definitely from a calendar. And I started doing the little thing down here, and then when I went up here, like I didn't use the same little brush or whatever like I should have, so some of the detail is not consistent or even or whatever. And we're getting way too much glare. Sorry, I'm trying to everything's backwards with this camera. There we go. Almost perfect. So I'm not super happy with it. And then the actual focal point being the watermill is just this flat, dead brown. So I'm not sure how to kind of make that pop a little better when it's hidden behind a tree. And of course, the color of the tree is not accurate. I just made it match the mill. And then the little house in the back up on the hill there, I think looks okay, but it's a little too perfect the way it, fits under that branch, but that's kind of how it looks in the thing. So it's kind of like, well, should I cheat it and cover more over it so you don't know what it is, or should I move some of the other branches or brown some of them out in here so that we see more brown and less yellow. But then the yellow is the part that pops. Like, you don't even really notice the orange until you get up close to it, even though it's there. Because I didn't want to cover all the yellow, because then the whole thing is orange and brown and it just turns into mush, yada, yada, yada. And then this section over here works about as well as I guess I could hope. But I didn't do every single brush stroke like I was, starting to do down here. But again, definitely autumn, definitely the end of summer look. This was a really earlier one that I did before that one, but then I came back and touched this one up a lot. And I still don't know that I achieved exactly what I wanted, but this was from somebody's calendar photo again. And this one was super bright and colorful and playful, and I could never quite achieve it. I had to take, originally the pumpkins were super orange, and then I dulled them all down to try and make it more realistic. But obviously this is like autumn harvest 100%. I mean, there's no gray area here. This is October in a nutshell. So that's why I like it. And of course, the smaller version of that, or I don't know, This one was another from a photo. Instead of the wood, this is more recent though. That's why I'm saying I don't like it necessarily as much as the other one in terms of all the execution. It's kind of more blobby, kind of letting a lot of detail. It's kind of trying to let the color speak for itself, but at the same time trying to put in detail in some spots and leave it out of others. And I don't know. I think it could be better. And of course, the dimensions were really hard to get on the odd shaped canvas. And of course, most landscapes are horiz, not vert, for a reason. Again, same with the house on the hill thing. It's a little bit off-putting, or it can be. The lighthouse one obviously worked better on a level than these do, because you have that tall structure to carry it all the way. So this one, you have a bit more tall structure with the water wheel than you have here. But here you have so much going on, whereas this you do have that open space with the sky. It reads better. Do you need all this? No, it'd probably be more fun if it was a square canvas like this one, but I had run out of square canvases, so that was pretty up. So picking the right canvas also, but not every painting is going to be the big one that you hang over the couch either. So that one, then that one, and that one. Okay, so then, yeah, right. Okay, so this is an older one. I don't have the photo here. Another one where it was same as that watermill. Do I stay or do I go? Do I cover it up? Do I put in more detail? Do I put in less detail? The trees were so big and commanding, but then the house gets totally lost, even though I could cover over some of that autumn foliage and just put in more red and make the house, more visible, which I might still do, just to admit that the photo works as a photo and the painting needs to work as a painting. So you already have all this Utah stuff going on back here, or New Hampshire, or wherever it is. And, you can get rid of it here and make the house look more like the house. And I can't really mess with the trees too much, even though they're technically too big in scale to really match the house. It's kind of an optical illusion. So in the picture, again, it works. And in the painting, it's kind of like, those trees are ginormous. Who lives in the house? Tom Thumb, But again, very autumn. But this one you could easily modify to summer, because all you'd have to do is, eliminate all this yellow and orange, make the house red, make the sky lighter blue, make the reflections on the water less autumny and more green. And, it'd be pretty fast to, again, have two of the same thing that are, interchangeable in this space. That one, okay. I don't have the photo of this one. This one I forgot that I did. This is a kind of a recent one. Similar, but very explosion of color, very, very autumn, almost no green, but enough green for some contrast. I really liked this one when I saw it. I knew I could paint this one and it would come out pretty well. Even though I didn't spend a ton of time on it like I would have some others, it might still need some detail work if you wanted to be fastidious, but I think it stands on its own. I think it works reasonably well. And I grayed up the sky. I'm positive. I don't think this is one I painted over something else for a change either, but I definitely did layers in the sky, which usually I don't do. Usually I'm pretty lazy with my sky. So this one, I really wanted to get a good color of that sky for contrast, but not make it just pale blue. Okay, I like that one. I don't love it, but I like it. But I'm on the verge of loving it now that I'm looking at it again. But I'm also seeing where I'm kind of like, well, I mean, again, I put a lot more into like a part like this than I usually would. Some of those older ones, like especially one 3 paintings ago or something, whereas this one has a lot of stuff going on in the reflections. It's just not accurate. And you could probably eliminate it and get, again, a less messy, more cohesive result or whatever. But wherever that painting went, I don't know. Okay, so this, yeah, okay, this is the same as that. So let's do those back to back. Let's do this one first. So this was something I saw at a yard sale. One of those framed posters, but the frame was all messed up. So I didn't want to just put thumbtacks through this and put it on the wall. I decided it would be more fun to paint the scene, but then I didn't make it bigger. I actually made it smaller, so I'm not entirely thrilled with it, but it's not the worst thing I've done. But it was a practice painting again to try and copy that without copying it exactly. And I did the clouds slightly different. I put like green in the clouds instead of white. I really didn't want to put a bunch of white in the clouds because I already whitened the church and the little houses. The one house is in the photo totally obscured by a tree. So this is one of those cases where you can see in the middle. I did leave out most of the tree. And I did put in way more house. It wasn't entirely on purpose. It was I was kind of going like, what did I do wrong? Oh, there was a tree there. Well, I don't want a whole tree there. So I don't like the way these three trees look. They all kind of look like not trees. I don't know. But I don't consider it finished, but it is what it is. Like I said, another kind of practice painting. There's a lot of blobby amorphous areas, you know. I think, again, where the photo just shows my limitations, like more than anything, I guess, you know, unfortunately, but that's the way it is sometimes when I'm, again, doing the dimensions different, so I couldn't really grid the thing and trying to move things around slightly to make some stuff fit and omit other stuff. Yada yada. So this I have two. All right, let's do a small one first. This was somebody else's still life photo. It said Happy Thanksgiving or something. So wrong holiday, but used this for the thumbnail just because it was easy. I think I showed this in the community menu last year whenever I worked on it. So yeah, pumpkins, obviously a little more green, a little less red, you know, still autumn, obviously. Still a lot of brown, still kind of moody. Just very generic. Obviously, I didn't want the Happy Thanksgiving on there because that's only one day or 1 week-ish. Whereas, you know, being that on its own can cover 3 months instead of 3 days. This was one I have two. Oh, sorry. Wait, one more first. I put this in the community menu. I thought this was what I did for a woman who has her own channel, and I thought she would enjoy this. This is from a catalog instead of a calendar for a change. And it's more dark academia, but so if you want to consider that more winter, but it also has the kind of Chinese lamp and the little dragon guys. So it could be winter. If you have a moody house, then it's still summer. It's not really autumn, and it's not really spring, but it has elements that can work for either. But of course, it's meant to be, again, dark academia. And she's not even necessarily a dark academia person, but I thought it was something that she would appreciate. And I don't even know if she ever looked at it. I never heard back from her. So here it is. Maybe I'll give it to somebody else. Whatever. But certain Gothic stuff is considered autumn, I guess more than other, but most of that stuff I consider pretty heavy winter vibe. This was another thing that I found at a yard sale. It's the watermill, and I had two different pictures of it from two different angles, so I painted it from both angles. This was the more recent one that did not, in my opinion, come out quite as good. And so it's got a lot of rocks, so it's got a lot of dead area space over here. I could have cropped that out if I wanted to kind of figure out some other way to present this. But this was just one where I wanted to keep it as accurate as possible for, you know, practice painting again. And if somebody buys it, they buy it. And again, we've got that borderline autumn thing going because we do have the foliage. Otherwise, it would only be the red wheel that would really stand out. I did lighten up in the wood, and I left the chute. Everything's backwards here. the water chute bit lighter on purpose for more contrast. So not too terribly deviating from the photo like I might in some stuff where I might darken up this and that. But I had to change the water obviously a little bit to make it be water. So I made it gray instead of brown, and I put in more splashes and some fake, colored rocks, or not quite accurate, realistic colored rocks. So I don't know that something like this, again, reads perfectly for a living room wall, but with a frame, almost usually everything looks better. Again, if you were going to do it, crop out a lot more of that and lose some of the foliage that covers over that kind of thing, make it more obvious. I could put in a lot more dark detail in here and stuff to really recess this back farther where it's supposed to be, and kind of clean up this smudginess, that kind of thing. And then this is kind of mushy and imprecise. There's a lot of stuff with it where I was trying to get the colors right more than being able to get all the details right, because stuff like this is so busy. Like, it's easy to kind of do this kind of stuff and just have fun with it, almost like stipple. But then all of a sudden you want crisp shadows and sharp lines and X's and Y's and things. So it's half fun and half work, and then it starts to become work and not fun anymore or whatever. So this, I don't have the other photo here, but this is, like I said, literally the same guy from a different angle. The whole thing. So here I really changed the water in some areas, but left the dimensions more or less correct. Everything's kind of in the right place until you get to the mill itself, where I had to repaint that. I had it too narrow and had it at an angle, and it's still a little too narrow and not quite all the angles correct, but you can tell what it is, and the rocks aren't taking up the whole half of the page, and that kind of thing. But the foliage is still kind of a lot there, but that's where you're getting your contrast with the water. But of course, I put way more effort into the water than I probably should have. It's probably distracting from the other elements or whatever. But I think I'm better at painting water sometimes than a lot of other stuff, because I like painting oceans and things. So just kind of worked out that way. And I was definitely trying to be more realistic with this one than it's still impressionistic in a lot of spots, but maybe it's overworked in some areas, but I don't care. Still haven't sold, but I don't think it's my worst picture. I definitely, like I said, you can see where maybe I paint a little bit different in some spots on, than this, but I think overall the older picture is still the slightly better one for a number of reasons. If you put them side to side, I mean, you can tell that they kind of could go together, I think. And of course, this one, a little bit less natural colors, a little bit more straight out of the tube looking, which is another thing I've struggled with. But sometimes it's, again, with the acrylic, it's going to dry so fast that you can't do all the color mixing that you'd like to do and all the accurate color matching that you'd like to do. Whereas with oil paint, you're going to have 3 days as opposed to 3 hours or whatever to kind of achieve the thing before you just have to come back at it fresh and put another layer on it and change an entire color entirely if you're going to change an entire color, which is even harder to match usually later and all that kind of thing. So, wow, an hour. Well, that was longer than I thought it would be, but I did show a lot of pictures. And like I said, I do have others that I want to show soon. So if anybody enjoyed this, let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. And nobody's going to watch all this. I did do a bit about furniture and stuff in the Texas video, the more recent, but I did not list that as a decor video, even though I had a part 3 or 4 is all decor about furniture and that kind of thing, but not seasonal per se. But I, we talk about it, of course, pretty much every time. So now I gotta put all this junk away. Hope that was a pretty good example, representation, explanation, whatever. Like I said, it's just kind of stuff I like to paint. Is just have a flimsy little thing. Here's one. As a matter of fact, like this doesn't look like much, but but you could make an abstract painting of that. I've done that kind of thing. Similar, like something like that, right? But calendars are great, and you see them for a few weeks and then they go away. So the ones that are the really good ones, well, see something like this, I will definitely paint that. I do birds like that fairly well. Where something like this, where it's somebody else's art, I don't usually copy that kind of stuff. Like I said, I do copy the Van Goghs once in a while, and Monet, and I forget. I can't think of the name right now, but I think it starts with a C. I like this kind of stuff. I wish I could do more like this, but it's not quite what I can achieve. And of course, I don't know how big this was before they shrank it down for the calendar. Where is it? Yeah, here's October. Pumpkins, orange, yay. A little bit of green, a little bit of yellow. Obviously, the same colors as that little square one that I showed earlier, and that other one with the fence and the grass and all that. But yeah, so I don't usually try to copy other people's stuff like that. I usually prefer a photo, because then it's my representation and not just literally stealing somebody else's art. Whereas something like this, again, I will copy it pretty close with the background. I won't play with the colors too much, because again, I think the composition is what it is. I'm not trying to change that per se. How the colors blend and the shades and the values is reading about correct. Sometimes that backfires. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, and you really have to just throw away the background entirely or whatever. But yeah, something like that quail, I'll probably do a painting of that in the near future. Because I have other bird ones. Anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought of the name of the artist. It doesn't matter. There's Monet is the other one I really like, but I can't copy his stuff very well. But there's another one that I've done. I just can't think of it. It doesn't matter. Anyway, if you know who Impressionists are, you already know who it is. Anyway, one of the Spanish guys, I think. So, okay, I'll stop now, and hopefully people will tune in for the next one in a week or two, whenever I get together those other pictures and it gets closer to the actual holiday.